meetup in real time, actually. All right, so let's start with the introduction to Astika. I'm very excited to introduce Astika, who has been practicing on StellarPeers. I've met Astika maybe a couple months ago, right, Astika?
Yes, that's true. That's true.
And Astika started, observing interviews, mock interviews, attending meetups, and she has a very good story in terms of how she actually really focused her practice in her preparation for the interview with Microsoft. And just a little bit of the background for Astika. I think Astika, maybe you yourself can say a little bit about yourself, but I think that I know that you were an engineer in India for 4 years, came to the United States. You have a master's in information systems from Berkeley. Me too, I'm from Berkeley, which is great.
Go Bears.
You did an internship with eBay, and then you had a latest company as an APM. And now you're transitioning into Microsoft, which is awesome.
So that's right. Yeah, you summed it up well. Thank you.
So just take it away. And what I think people would like to hear from you is, how was your preparation? Because you really sped it up at the end. And what are your learnings from it? What are your advice, to people that have short deadlines coming up, on what to focus? And yeah, so go ahead.
Sure. So I'll start from last year. So I was in my third semester, I think final semester of Berkeley, and because I was in the final stages of my master's program, I was already inundated with a lot of work. So I did not really find the time to actually prepare for interviews. But I used to get a lot of interviews because of career fairs and stuff. So, but since I used to go till the last round of every company, but then somehow it did not convert at all. And but I was lucky enough to find this company. It's called Elo Touch Solutions. It's a hardware company, and they're starting to go into software. So I saw this as a good opportunity for as a stepping stone into product management. Once that happened, I felt the need to switch again, and this particular Microsoft opportunity came up, and I was like, okay, why not give it a try? But what happened after my graduation and before I got the Microsoft interview was just tons of not even rejections, just lull, there was nothing happening at all. I used to apply a lot, but then I used to never get any interview call, and which was really very disheartening. And I was like, okay, what am I doing wrong here? Is my resume not up to
the website?
Sorry?
Those applications were through the website, or
everything? I did everything. I applied through website. I did referrals. I contacted people on LinkedIn. I asked for referrals on LinkedIn. I did everything, but nothing really panned out. And so I was just fortunate that at the same time, both Yelp and Microsoft came up. So both the opportunities came at the same time. And so I interviewed with Microsoft in October end, and then I was in India for a month, and then I got to know that, okay, I've cleared the first round and I'll be going into the second one in Jan. So once I came back from India, that was around somewhere around Christmas, I just had 2 to 3 weeks, I think. Yeah, I think 2.5 weeks to actually just prepare. And before that, I had never prepared for a PM interview. All I was doing was just joining the mock interview calls on StellarPeers, and just as a listener, just listening to these interviews. And I had a couple Slack channels as well, that I had joined, and I used to participate in those meetups, video meetups as well, but only as a listener. I never participated. But then I remember talking to you actually, Malana, and you were like, stop just listening, just participate. So I felt that I really this is my last chance, and I really have to put in whatever I have. And who knows, how long it'll take for another opportunity to come up like this. So, and that was the best period actually, because it was the holiday season, and I just got 2 weeks to myself. So I did really actually put in a lot of hard work, I have to say. I treated it as an exam, so to speak. So the process that I followed was, I had a very pointed approach, in the sense that for Microsoft, I just targeted the types of questions that Microsoft usually asks. If you go to see, the preparation for a product management interview, it's so different for like every company. It's like different. And plus, there are tons of resources out there, tons of books, tons of websites, and it's just difficult to like have that particular starting point. So what I did was, firstly I went to Glassdoor, and I had a couple Microsoft friends as well. I asked them what kind of questions are asked, and what particular types of questions are asked. From Glassdoor as well, I did like a sort of a research analysis on like what kinds of questions are asked. And in my research, it came up that product design questions, behavioral questions, metrics, and technical, these four types of questions are something that are like really asked very often. So I concentrated on these first. I started with product design. For product design questions, I can go through like every type of question if you want me to go through that, or if you want me to touch any other point, I'll be happy to do.
I think it would be interesting to hear from you what what the questions they ask you, what types of questions they ask you for each of these.
For my interview?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So yeah, there were in my interview a lot of behavioral questions were asked. Behavioral and situational questions, not just behavioral, actually situational, in the sense like what if you're in the situation, how would you deal with it, and like so these behavioral and situational questions took up at least 50 to 60% of the interview, in every interview actually. And other questions were like just evenly spread out. So like in my first interview, it was a mix of product design, behavioral, and technical questions. So it was an algorithm question, wherein I was just asked to like brainstorm solutions as to how will I come up with an algorithm to a particular to a particular situation. It was not a coding question as such, but I had the liberty to code, but I chose not to code because I'm not good at it. So I just went with the algorithm, and it was more like testing my thought process. So the second one was mostly again like behavioral, and then a metrics based question and a situational question. There was also a lunch interview, which was mostly behavioral questions, and like what do I like about Microsoft, and what do I want in my next role, and stuff like that. Then again followed by product design, behavioral again, and I would say experimentation sort of questions. Yeah, so overall I see there were a lot of product design and behavioral questions, if I have to sum it up. Yeah.
And in terms of the product design questions,
yeah,
where the questions on StellarPeers and on books were they helpful?
They were very helpful. I thankfully, because of the mock interviews that I did on StellarPeers and through other Slack channels as well, I had that process, the complete process that we go through in a mock interview, all in place. And it was so easy for me then to like just have that particular starting point. And even got the feedback in one of the interviews that, okay, the minute I reached the solutions part, which is at the very end, the interviewer was like, let's just stop here because solutions don't matter at all. You can come up with tons and tons of solutions. It doesn't matter. All I wanted to see was the process that you followed, and exactly, going through the customers and like personas and needs and everything. So that's what he wanted to see. So that's when I understood that, hey, preparation really matters a lot. Yeah. In my 2 weeks of journey that I did, I had no idea if this is enough preparation. But when on the day of the final interview, I did realize that, okay, because I could compare, I had a string of failures in interviews because of not preparing well.
Oh, so that's very interesting insight.
That is very interesting to me. And I was like, oh my God, thank God I did prepare, And I would really, I would be very honest that, in those 2 weeks of time as well, I felt that it's not enough preparation. It's just 50% that I'm doing. I didn't even touch the estimation questions at all, you know. I remember we had like one interview, both of us, and that was the first time. And what you taught me was the only thing that I ever learned in an estimation interview. And I just went straight up with that. But I was lucky that I wasn't asked that. Yeah, and even the book. So I followed Lewis Lynn's product management interview book with like 164 questions that are solved. That was really helpful. I found that really helpful. And Decode and Conquer for frameworks. I used to always swear by cracking the PM interview when I was sort of unprepared in the last year. But I didn't find that really helpful this time because it's good like for the breadth, but it doesn't cover the depth, is what I feel. So if I have to target a particular question, then I need solutions, you know, to them. In cracking the PM, I found the solutions were really less, like few of them. So yeah, those would be my 2 cents.
And you said, you know, you said, Astika, that these 2.5 weeks, you really were preparing like 8 hours a day.
Yes, I was preparing a lot because those 8 hours a day, or 6 to 8 hours actually, also I take into account the 3 hours of mock interviewing practice that I was doing. And the others was just reading through the books and, you know, that I just told you, because I had never ever touched any PM book before or any resource or with the intention of actually preparing, you know. It was just very plain basic behavioral and situational questions that I used to prepare beforehand. I did prepare even behavioral stories this time, following the STAR approach and everything. So that also really helped. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And you know, one of the things that I think happens, and you probably can make the contrast, you know, between those interviews that you had and that you didn't convert, and then these ones that you did convert, in terms of the confidence that help you psychologically.
For sure. Yes, the confidence that I did get, even after like just giving 3 or 4 mock interviews with like people, you get that sort of confidence that, hey, I'm at least able to open my mouth when a question is thrown at me, you know. I'm not just, you know, startled by it and I just don't shut up. So that is enough confidence. And I think confidence is something that's in your head that you need to build it up. And you need to prove to yourself that, hey, I have done so and so, you know, this much of preparation, and which is enough. So I sort of had that. It was, for me, I was just happy that, okay, I got this time of 2 weeks where I could prepare. Earlier, I couldn't even get the time to prepare. So I was just happy with that. And as a matter of fact, if I must tell you, on the day of the interview, when I was going from one building to another for my first interview, I received an email, which was a rejection email from another company. So I was like, oh my God, this is the only chance that I have. I have to give it my all. So I took that as a positive thing, thankfully.
That's great. You're very good with that. Huh? You're very good with like staying cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And just to be make sure that everybody knows, the role that you got is an APM or entry level PM, the first level PM.
It's called program manager at Microsoft. So product managers are called program managers there. That's just the language that they use, but it's an entry level role. It's not a senior PM.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. I think those are very interesting insights. You know, I would like to open this up for questions from that's in the audience.
I see one question here. Actually, Apeksha typed in that she wants me to share the resource names again.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. I think as a good starting point for people who want to begin the preparation, please go through Decode and Conquer. I think I would swear by it. I really like that book. It has frameworks. So if I have to spell it out, for my for product design questions, the circles framework really helped me. For the metrics question, the AARM method really helped me. For the behavioral question, the STAR framework is good enough to like just, you know, sort of gather your thoughts. Apart from these books, another good book is the Lewis Lynn's product management interview book. It's a 164 questions solved book resource. I really like that. And StellarPeers for sure. Please, please just. I really like the way I really like the way that people take StellarPeers calendar so seriously, and everybody is like so well prepared, and everything is very structured. It really helps a lot. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. No, I think, I'm very impressed with the caliber of people that are on the platform. Like
For
I
sure.
resumes, and I'm like, whoa.
For sure. Yes, for sure.
Any other questions?
Hey, Astika, thanks for being here today. I
Hey.
had a question. I noticed, or I remember that you said that you had previous product manager experience, and
Yes.
so I wanted to ask how that, I guess, helped you when interviewing, or what sort of skills did you find important to draw on?
Yeah, for sure. So it was, I think it always helps if you have prior product management experience, be it internship or full-time experience, and I had a mixture of both. So they were really interested in like just knowing what products I worked on and touching different parts and of the product journey. As in, some interviews used to ask me, how did you launch it? And then others would like be like, okay, how did you start the process in the first place? Did you do any UX design or research? And so they had that, just opened an opportunity for them actually to pose any questions on PM. And the answers that they got were actually genuine answers because I had the experience. So they could actually really understand and pinpoint that okay, she does get the concepts and she has that practical experience, it's not just theoretical. So I feel that it really helped me because I could speak genuinely and honestly on what I learned from my past PM experiences, even though they were not very big or very great products. But all they wanted to see was if I understand the skills and if I'm able to speak and understand like a PM. So yeah.
And so I have one other question. So Astika, the companies that you interview at the beginning, that you were not prepared at the time.
Yes.
How would you compare their questions? I mean, I don't know if
I do recall. I do recall the majority of them, and I am so saddened by the fact that I did not prepare earlier because they were all standard questions that I remember a Google my first round at Google. It was a phone interview, and they asked me, how would you design a video camera for your grandmother? And which is if I have to answer it now after preparation, then I'm sure that I'll be at least able to reach the solution part of it. Go through the entire journey using the framework. But at the time I was like, hey, what kind of question is he asking? I had no idea that it is a type of a question that PM interviews get asked. And it's all my fault that I did not do my research. I had absolutely no time during my program, but had I done that, I would have been in a better position for sure. And the other interviews with like Zynga and Redfin and like one other that I'm forgetting, barring the coding questions and technical questions, I think every other question was sort of similar to what would fall in my radar, in my preparation radar is what I feel. Yeah.
In terms of the technical questions that they ask you at these companies, you said that they usually were not coding. So it was mostly pseudocode, algorithmic
yes.
pseudocode?
Yeah, pseudocode algorithm.
I
think they're pretty, it's all whiteboarding, and they're pretty lenient when it comes to coding. I think most of them want to see, I think Google is one company that's really, really into like coding, but that's what I've heard. I don't know. But other companies, from my experience, I feel they were okay with pseudocode, and it didn't matter to them that I did not know the syntax well, or I am taking a longer approach or something. They did ask me questions on time complexity and space complexity almost every time when there was a coding question. So that is a concept that I think one must prepare when tackling a coding question. Yeah.
And did they ask you, in terms of the technical questions, did they ask you any systems design questions?
Let me remember. I think one did. Some elevator system design question was asked, but not a lot, I would say. Maybe it's just my experience that I did not face them a lot, but I've heard from others' experience that they do ask a system
well, it depends on the company.
It also depends on the company.
Definitely Google asks us those questions.
Oh, okay. Even Amazon, I think when I interviewed with Amazon, they did ask me one system design question.
Yeah, I think if it's AWS, for sure you're going to get a question like that.
I don't remember what it was, but it was some kind of system design question. It was like a year back. I don't remember. So,
yeah. Right, cool. Yeah. Anybody else has a question for Astika?
Yeah, I have a question. Hey, Astika, really nice to meet you, and thanks for making the time for this. I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about the stories that you prepared for your behavioral interviews. Like, what are they around mostly? What are the themes that they speak to?
I think for behavioral questions, the themes that I followed. So one quick tip actually is to prepare behavioral questions while you're like participating in mock interviews with like people who are preparing for Amazon, because Amazon will ask you behavioral questions on the 14 leadership principles, and it's just amazing to like practice with those guys because they have their stories on point.
Inside out,
yeah, inside out. So I did that actually a couple of times. So the themes that I followed were actually the 14 principles of Amazon: leadership, customers, conflicts. What else? Team, like how do you deal with like people in cross-functional teams, and teamwork. Yeah, these are couple themes that I followed, and I would really recommend that you go to the leadership principles of Amazon just to understand what kind of themes are asked. Out of the 14, at least you can pick 4 to 5 which are common with like every other company. So,
yeah, usually what they ask is about like leadership, challenges, failures,
successes,
teamwork, right?
Yeah.
And there's another one. I forget what it is, but so those ones.
Yeah, I was asked in my final round at Microsoft. I was asked something that you have done in your life which has made you proud. It was like a very generic question, and it helps to ask clarifying questions as well. So I asked, like, what do you mean? What do you mean? Like what? Like when? Where? What? So he was like, in your professional life, in the last 3 years. I was like, okay, let me give you an example. So yeah, and it's. I think the way I followed structuring my stories was just writing whatever was in my head first on a sheet of paper, and then just tagging them like, okay, this story would be a good story for leadership and teamwork. This one would be a good failure story, but it also talks about leadership. So that in my head, if I've already spoken on one story, I have other stories in my toolkit to like just pick up and start.
And I guess it helps to repeat those stories again and again and again.
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else has a question?
Yes, hi. I had a question here.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming and sharing. This is really good. This is where the rubber meets the road, right? So this is where it becomes really real. So the question that I have is, you said you had a lot of situational questions, right? So can you tell me a bit more about what kind of situational questions you had?
Situational questions were mostly, I would put them in the behavioral bucket as well. But I remember one question that was asked was that you have a great idea that you want to build, but maybe there are not enough resources or not enough budget in the team. So how will you convince your leadership, your team, the team leaders and the engineers to actually, if you're in that situation, how would you convince them to go ahead with this? So that was one kind of a question, and that could be attacked. That can be attacked from like various angles. You can speak to your leadership skills or your convincing powers or something. Or I actually went with a blend of leadership and some product management skill, which is like coming up with an MVP first and then going ahead with the final project, if that works. So that gave me that. I took that as a good opportunity to show my some product management skills that I wanted to show, but also wanting to show my team management and communication and those kind of things as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's a very good answer.
And when it comes to, I had a follow-on question actually for the behavioral as well as the situational questions, right? I know for the design ones, I'm like, you have what, 20, 25 minutes to go through your entire process of answering. In behavioral, I'm thinking maybe you'll get what, 4 to 5 minutes per question? Or...
So again, I think it all depends on like, on a case-by-case basis. Also at how much interview time in all is left. But for behavioral questions, I think that's where, having a framework in mind really helps, because it also gives you an opportunity to like just partition your thoughts. So that you are not just explaining the situation a lot and you have not eaten up like 15 minutes just doing that. Also, another very good cue is just reading your interviewers' expressions, facial expressions, or if it's a phone interview, generally they will give you some clues that either they're getting bored or they'll say that, hey, we are short on time and stuff. But I think on an average, 5 to 10 minutes maybe would be good. Yeah, if it's a 45-minute interview or a 60-minute interview.
Okay, all right, good. Thank you.
Yeah. And Astika, so what would be, somebody asked me the other day, what would be my reaction? Like, let's say that they ask you a question and not right away you have a way to answer, right? How have you been in that situation, and what was your strategy?
Do you mean that I don't know the answer to it, or
like it's a very open-ended question, right? It's like and so at that moment, for example, if they ask you, let's say I ask you a question like, how should Microsoft compete? How should Azure compete with Google Cloud? That's a very
that's a difficult question to answer, because it requires having sort of domain expertise in both of these, and a person who doesn't have that is actually screwed. So
I mean, I do have a framework for that. Of course, there's always a framework for that.
Right.
But let's say that you don't know the framework.
Exactly.
Then that's what I mean. What would you do?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think my strategy is always to like just at least, firstly, I take a few minutes if I have to think. That's what I've learned from all the mock interviews, that don't just start blabbering, and you can always ask for some time to hold your composure and to like just gather your thoughts. So I would do that first, and then secondly, I would try to, if I can't hit the question, like if I can't hit the bullseye, I'll try to be as near as possible to it, and I'll try to like talk about things that will give them an idea that she knows, if not everything, something, or I always believe that something is better than nothing. Instead of just just giving up or something, it's always good to ask clarifying questions, or even just being honest that, hey, I'm not well versed with this particular concept or this particular tool. Can you help me understand that better, or do you have some more information that would help me strategize this better? So I think being just open and frank about it is, I think, the best way to save yourself. Yeah.
Do you run into any awkward situation in your interviews?
I don't think so.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I don't think so. If I would have, it hasn't been like super awkward. If it's something because of my doing, then I would apologize, or I'm usually very straightforward and say that, hey, I've been in situations when I've gone on to the third question and then I realized that I said something in my first answer that may have upset him or is not something right. I always say that, hey, let's go back to this one, and I have something else that I might want to share. What do you think about it? If you have the time, then can we talk about it and stuff like that? So I'm very open that way.
How about, I'm sure they ask you, well, do you have questions for us? How do you prepare for that?
I usually never prepared for those kind of questions, but this time I did give it a thought. So I went onto the Microsoft website and I did sort of some research, and I came across a concept called fluid design that Microsoft actually has or like believes in. So the fluid design, I wanted to have some questions around that. So I asked my second interviewer a question when I was, given the opportunity on this, and he actually didn't know the answer to it. So he was like, "Oh, really? Microsoft does that? I have no idea. What is it about?" So that gave me another opportunity to show that I have done my homework on Microsoft as well. So I was just lucky in this case. But it's always good to I always go with basic questions like, if the person has spent a lot many years in that particular company, so what were the challenges that you have faced, and especially in product management, because product management in every company is so different. There are different challenges in every company depending on the products. So I usually want to understand genuinely that what are the challenges or roadblocks if I have to do product at your company. What can I expect is something that I usually ask. Apart from that, if there are some things which are very peculiar or very specific to that particular company, then I go with those.
That's very good. Let's see, I think I have all the questions about that.
Quick question, Astika.
Oh, sure.
So while preparing for your other interviews and even for Microsoft, were you, connecting with the people who were already working there, alumni of those companies or people who were left or working, and how useful were those resources?
I did connect with people at Yelp for my Yelp interview. Microsoft, just with one person, and that wasn't very helpful. But for Yelp, it was super helpful. So I can speak more on that. It was. I usually just ask if a person is working there. I just want to understand what opportunities are there for product at XYZ company, and then what are some of the challenges, just so that I can in my interviews show give some personalized sort of answers. Apart from that, I usually it's a natural tendency to just go ahead and ask, hey, what kind of questions can I expect at your company, and sometimes they do answer that kind of question, sometimes they don't know. And when they do, then I take it seriously that, hey, if that person is saying that at Amazon they are really into system design questions, if somebody tells me that, then I would take that seriously and give some thought and put some thought into system design questions. I think it's always good to touch base with them, if you have that opportunity.
And Astika, when you interview with Microsoft, did you know who was going to interview you, so that you or which departments they were from?
No, they did not tell me that. They said that they don't usually let that information out. And on the day of the interview, before my first interview, I was told 30 minutes before my first interview, I was told what group it was, and it was a very large group.
That would be much more helpful to help you prepare a good question.
Yes. Right? Yeah, that's true actually. But I did ask them, I did ask my recruiter before the interview that, hey, posing the same point that it would be good for me to have that kind of information. But he was like, they're not going to ask you any questions that are related to a particular product of that team. So you don't have to worry about that. And it'll be a general kind of an interview. So I was like, okay.
Yeah. And how fast did they return, after they interview you on site? How fast did they return to you?
I think within a week. Yeah, after a week. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. They call you or they send you email?
It was actually a little weird. He sent me an email saying that the feedback was positive,
Yeah.
So, and he wants to talk to me the next day. I didn't know what to make of it. Like, I didn't know that if he's being like just polite or if it's a yes. And then over the call, the recruiter was pretty chill about it, and he just started going over the offer. And I was like, wait, did I actually get the offer? So he was like, yes. And he expected me to, read in between the lines from the email that he had sent to me the previous day.
Well, I'm sure that was a great surprise also.
It was a great surprise, yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Are there any other last questions for Astika?
Yeah, Astika, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the associate PM role that you were in prior to Microsoft. What did you learn from that experience, and how long were you in that role for?
Yeah, sure. So I started that in July last year. So it's not been a long time. It's been like 6 or 7 months. And that was, so that's a hardware company, and they've just started going into software. So the product that I was managing was the SaaS product that they've just recently launched. It was a very different experience, and a very, I would say, a very good opportunity for me, because there weren't many PMs firstly in that company, and I think I was the only software PM in that company. So even though I was a new grad, they did put a lot of trust in me. But I feel that there was a lot of learning to do, more than I could deliver. I feel that I learned a lot from it, because every day was a learning experience for me in that company. Because I was new, the company was, sort of new in handling a software product. So there were a lot of mistakes that we did, but we learned from them. So I had tons of good stories from this particular experience to talk about, in my interviews as well. All genuine stories. So yeah, I'm thankful for the opportunity that I have. Yeah.
Cool. And then a follow-up question: with all the companies that you've interviewed with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where do they fall in terms of having development teams on site versus having remote development teams? And was that like a factor that you considered when you were kind of sussing out each of these jobs?
Oh, I had actually no idea about the development teams and their, the proximity to the teams here. I did not keep that into account when I was taking things into consideration. As a matter of fact, for my current role at this hardware company, there are some software developers back in India who work remotely. So I can talk about what that experience was. And it's a little hard managing or just collaborating with teams that are remote. But it's, if there's no other choice, then it's just a matter of managing it well, and good communication and everything. But I did not consider that as a fact for my interviews or the companies that I chose.
Okay, cool. And what about your current team? Are they on site, or are they is part of the remote?
No, my current team is on site. Just a handful of developers are remote. So I directly collaborate with the project managers and the engineering manager, who are very much in the Bay Area, in the same office. Mm-hmm. So it's not a big deal for me, but for them, because the engineering manager has to make sure that the remote developers are in sync with what's going on here. And there's a 12-hour difference between like USA and India. So it's difficult for her more than me. But but I have seen her difficulties as well.
Yeah. Okay, I see. So it was more on her, I guess, to like run
this.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Cool. Thanks.
All right. Any other last questions for Astika?
Yeah. What was the most challenging question that you were presented, and how did you go about answering it?
In my Microsoft interview?
In general, across, or whatever comes to mind that you want to share.
Oh wow, this can take a while. I'll have to think what exactly. I think for me, the challenging question is most of the time a technical question, or the one that involves coding, because I always sort of keep it for the, for the last, and I don't prepare much for it. But, and that sort of stays with me, that, hey, I haven't prepared much for a technical question. And when that's thrown at me, then I'm like, okay, I don't know if I'll be able to answer that at all. As a matter of fact, for my first interview, which was a 30-minute on-site interview for Microsoft, I was asked 3 coding questions back to back. And that just, shot the level of confidence down for me. But I did not give up. I'm just thankful that I did not give up. And I just constantly, I was taking the cues from the interviewer. He was a little helpful in, guiding me as to what the next steps could be. But that's what, like I said earlier, if I couldn't hit the bullseye, I made sure that I'm in the closest possible area around the bullseye. So I just did not give up, and just kept saying whatever I thought was the right answer. Yeah.
Okay, thanks so much, and congrats on your offer.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, just to wrap it up, I think, Astika, I think that the key takeaways from your experience is really, hey, you really need to prepare for your interview, and it's possible to do it.
Yes.
In 2.5 weeks. And the way to do it is to be, focus sharp on the company and the type of questions that they're going to ask you in this company. So you cannot just spread thin. You have to really focus on the types of questions they're going to ask you, and practice them. Read all the frameworks that you can, learn them, practice them with somebody else, doing mock interviews back and forth, and that will give you sort of like psychological confidence to go into these interviews really well.
And for mock interviews, if you guys are doing that, I would really recommend, making notes or asking the person if they're okay with recording one of those or something, and going back. The main thing is to not just get done with it and just stop there. Just go back and understand what were the mistakes. What did you learn? What was something that was new that you learned from this particular mock interview? So from all the mock interviews, I had everything written down. After every mock interview, I used to make notes. And I had at the end of 10 or 12 interviews, I had a good list of, okay, these are the list of personas, these are the list of use cases, these are the list of solutions that came up in all these interviews, so that I have everything in my head in a good framework, the framework that works for me. And then I can use another framework that works for the interviewer to help them understand what I want to convey. But if things are not clear in my own head, then I'll just take longer time to think, okay, oh, this question looks familiar in that mock interview. What did I say then? And then what should I say now? And it's a lot of confusion. So I think it's always a good practice to revisit the notes that you make during your mock interviews. It's something that I would recommend.
That makes absolute sense. I definitely write a lot of the answers, as you know.
Yeah. Me too.
That helps me internalize a lot of the frameworks I don't think about, and it's like, they just come out.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Astika, congratulations again. You're going to do pretty well. Thanks. And let's stay in touch,
For sure.
I think we are connected LinkedIn with you. So, I wish you the best, and I hope to see you also back, because I need to talk to you about the new program for mentorship.
Yes, I'm so excited for your new feature, and I want to be 100% part of it. So you have my support, and I would be happy to stay in touch with all of you guys as just LinkedIn messages.
Yeah, or you can always contact me, and I can always connect you with it.
Yeah.
All right, awesome.
Cool. Thank you so much. Nice to meet you guys. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Bye.